The next global conflict may not begin in Taiwan, not in Ukraine, not even in the Middle East, but in the frozen Arctic. As ice melts, new battlefields emerge when nuclear submarines shadow each other. Missiles hidden in deep silos awaiting command to wake from deep slumber. Nuclear icebreakers are on prowl for energy and critical minerals, cutting across thick ice for new shipping lanes, where global powers compete for hypersonic missile defense. For decades, the Arctic Circle is known for just two things: the infinite ice and the polar bear. It was the frozen desert, geographically isolated and geopolitically ignored. For decades, the Arctic Circle was known for just two things: infinite ice and polar bears. It was a frozen desert, geographically isolated and geopolitically ignored. But right now, underneath the melting ice, the world's superpowers are quietly preparing for a conflict that could reshape the global balance of power. As global temperature rises, the ice is vanishing. According to NOAA data, the sea ice extent has dropped down from 4.72 million square kilometer in 2021 to 4.28 million square kilometer in 2025. And as it disappears, it's exposing a multi-trillion-dollar jackpot of oil, gas, and rare earth mineral alongside brand new shipping lanes that could completely bypass the Suez Canal. Russia is rebuilding Soviet-era military bases, NATO is holding its largest polar war games in history, and China, a country thousands of miles away, has officially declared itself as the near-Arctic state. In this special episode of The Strategist, our global analysis show we are going to break down exactly why the Arctic is becoming the most dangerous region on Earth, and how a single miscalculation there could lead to World War III. Hi, I'm Shreya and you're watching our special show, The Strategist. Let's get started. You might wonder why countries would fight over a frozen wasteland. But let me tell you, according to estimates by the US Geological Survey, the Arctic holds an estimate of 90 billion barrels of oil, 1,670 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and trillions of dollars worth of critical rare earth minerals. That is roughly 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and a staggering 30% of its undiscovered natural gas. Geographically, the Arctic region includes the Arctic Ocean and parts of countries like Russia, Canada, Alaska of United States, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, and Finland. But today, all these countries have their eyes locked into this very frozen wasteland. The Arctic region is strategically important in varied aspects other than the rich oil, natural gas, and rare earth minerals. As climate changes rapidly, it is simultaneously opening up the world's most lucrative new maritime shipping lanes and creating a highly volatile military flashpoint. Specifically, the Northern Sea route hugging Russia and the Northwest Passage winding through Canada. These aren't just minor adjustments, they reduce the transit distance by thousands of kilometers. For example, a cargo ship traveling from Shanghai to Rotterdam covers 21,000 kilometers via the Suez Canal, which would roughly take around 35 days. But by taking the Arctic route, the distance culminates to 13,000 kilometers, cutting travel time to 30 to 40%, saving massive amount of fuel and completely restructuring the global trade. It means faster military deployment and crucially, whoever controls these routes gain absolute economic leverage over global trade. But with commercial wealth comes heavy military muscle. So, who are the players sitting in this frozen chessboard? First and the most dominant is Russia. Geographically, Russia owns all the largest chunks of the Arctic coast, and they have spent the last decade heavily militarizing it. They have reopened dozens of Soviet-era military outposts, deployed advanced S-400 air defense system, and built an unmatched fleet of dozens of icebreakers, including massive nuclear-powered ones. Russia has tried to legally expand its Arctic territory through the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, the UNCLOS. The country claimed large portion of the Arctic seabed argued that Lomonosov Ridge is the extension of Russian territory and submitted claims to the UN for the ownership right over the resource-rich areas. One of the most significant action done by Russia was planting of the Russian flag under the Arctic seabed in 2007, in which Russia performed the first ever crewed descent of the ocean bottom in the North Pole. They dropped a titanium tube containing the Russian flag, while the submersibles collected specimens of Arctic flora and fauna and apparently recorded video of the dives. Along with that, the North Pole 35-man drifting ice station was also established in the region. For Russia, the Arctic is its economic life support machine. The region holds a staggering amount of untapped fossil fuels, including vast deposits of oil, natural gas, and liquefied natural gas, or LNG. State giants like Gazprom, Rosneft, and Novatek have started the country's economic future here. At the center of all of this is the Yamal LNG project, located in the deep Siberian Arctic region. This massive facility service is a flagship symbol of Russia's ability to extract energy from the world's harshest environment. On the other side stands NATO, led by the United States. For years, Washington treated Arctic as a low priority, but not anymore. Here comes Trump singing the MAGA tune. In his Make America Great Again strategy, now Arctic areas like Greenland and Iceland have taken priority. And it is all based on US military inputs. The US military realizes that the shortest path for the Russian nuclear missile or strategic bomber to hit North America is right over the North Pole. The core of the US Arctic strategy sits squarely in Alaska. Anchorage and Fairbanks have been transformed into the ultimate polar projection hubs. The US military has deployed over 100 F-35 stealth fighter to the state, the largest concentrated fleet of the fifth-generation aircraft anywhere on Earth specifically designed to intercept Russian bombers and secure air superiority. Simultaneously, America and Canada are pouring over $38 billion into modernizing NORAD with the over-the-horizon radar and AI-based tracking networks. With the recent accession of Finland and Sweden, 7 out of the 8 Arctic nations are now NATO members, effectively sealing off Russia's western flank and massive multinational polar war games, codenamed Eastern Sentry. Yet, Washington's biggest bottleneck remains on the water, the icebreaker gap. While Russia boasts a fleet of 40 icebreakers, the United States relies on just one single operational heavy polar icebreaker, the decade-old USCGC Polar Star. To break Russia's monopoly, Washington has just launched a dual-track offensive. Along the delayed Polar Security Cutter program, the US Coast Guard just finalized a massive $3.5 billion contract with Navy Defense to build 5 brand new cutting-edge Arctic security cutters. Born from historic $6.1 billion trilateral ice pact signed alongside Finland and Canada, this deal will split production between Finniss Yard and Texas, aiming to bring heavy Arctic shipbuilding expertise directly to American shores. Furthermore, NATO relies heavily on countries like Norway for radar infrastructure and submarine tracking, and Denmark for its control over Greenland. Remember back in 2019 when Donald Trump suggested buying Greenland and the media laughed? Politically, it sounded bizarre, but strategically, it made a perfect sense. Greenland is the ultimate choke point for monitoring missile routes and submarines across the Atlantic Ocean. Greenland's Arctic geography makes it one of the most important locations on Earth for missile detection, space surveillance, and Arctic military control, which Trump has wisely decoded. The Golden Dome project, in which Trump is largely investing a $1.2 trillion, will therefore justify for expanding military infrastructure in the Greenland, increasing Arctic surveillance, countering Russia and China, and consolidating long-term Arctic strategic dominance. To place and maintain the Golden Dome sensor, crucial for air defense from hypersonic missile threat, Trump had publicly contemplated owning Greenland. He expressed fears that if US does not own it, China may own it. As polar ice continues to melt, new shorter maritime shipping routes are opening, potentially positioning Greenland as the major commercial maritime hub between Asia, North America, and Europe. Now, amidst all of this, thousands of miles away from the Arctic Circle, China is poking its nose in the Arctic waters. In 2018 white paper, China officially declared itself as the near Arctic state. NATO is arming itself not against just Russia but also to fight and win if China dares entry into any conflict in this region. China wants to build what it's called the Polar Silk Road. They want a piece of the shipping lane and access to the minerals. Because they lack geographical territory, they are teaming up with Russia, funding Russian Arctic gas plants in exchange for long-term energy security. Power of Siberia 1 and proposed 2 LNG pipeline is a step in this direction. China, however, works silently and secretly underwater of Arctic ice to avoid any geopolitical heat. The Polar Silk Road serves as Beijing's ultimate plan B, establishing a secure alternate energy and logistic corridor completely insulated from Indian naval dominance in the Strait of Malacca in case of any conflict arises with India or even with Western nations. To anchor itself in the region without holding sovereign territory, Beijing is using science as a strategic wedge. Operating out of its Yellow River station in Svalbard and deploying its Zulong icebreaker, China gathers critical oceanographic data. While framed as climate research, Western intelligence warns these mapping operations carrying dual-use military utility, charting submarine pathways and positioning satellite tracking networks for digital Polar Silk Road. Now, how does this hustle for power in the Arctic turn into an actual shooting war? There could be 3 terrifying triggers. First, with Finland and Sweden recently joining NATO, the alliance now completely surrounds the European gateway to the Arctic, while Russia now feels backed into a corner. Moscow views this expansion as a direct threat to its northern border, meaning their military posture is in the absolute readiness. Second, underneath the thick Arctic ice sheets, nuclear submarines can hide in total secrecy. They are invisible to satellites and incredibly difficult for sonar to detect. This is where Russia hides its second strike nuclear capability, the submarines meant to retaliate if Russia is ever hit first. If NATO builds up too much anti-submarine warfare technology in the Arctic, Russia loses its ultimate shield. To Moscow, that is an existential red line that will fight to protect. And finally, the sheer risk of an accident. Imagine a Russian submarine accidentally colliding with a US Navy vessel under the ice, or a radar malfunction where a meteorological rocket is misidentified as a nuclear strike. Because there is no hotline or established security framework for the Arctic, a small misunderstanding could scale into a hot war in minutes. The tragedy of the Arctic is a dark irony. Human activity caused the planet to warm, melting the ice. But instead of looking at the environmental collapses as a warning sign, the world's biggest superpower are looking it as an opportunity to extract more oil, claim more land, and deploy more weapons. The Arctic is no longer just a remote destination. It is a volatile cocktail of energy dependence, trade dominance, and nuclear deterrence. It is without a doubt the ultimate geopolitical battlefield in the 21st century. That is it for today's episode of The Strategist. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to National Defense. I am Shreya signing off.